This is my one-room studio. It's a fairly large room. It's about 33 feet long from front to back and 18 feet wide in the middle. There's a ceiling peak, if you want to show that. That's 12 feet high at the peak. And this goes in a good orientation where the ceiling goes up from the front and then back down in the rear. And that's better for audio than having it come up from the right and back down on the left. I really prefer a one-room studio. First of all, I use this mostly for myself, and I do record others in here, not for hire anymore, but I've had entire small orchestras in here, and string sections and all kinds of things. When I recorded my cello concerto, I had literally a full orchestra in here, piece by piece, and it's just a lot easier. Communication is much easier. You don't have to keep running back and forth from one room to the other and seeing through the glass. And worrying about headphone levels, and though we do use headphones, and I use headphones, you just turn off the loudspeakers, and everybody wears headphones. I have a Rolls 6-output headphone splitter box down there near the bottom of my rack. It has 6 separate volume controls, and they're all powered outputs, and I have a number of other splitters, so I can provide headphones for, a dozen people if needed, and I'll buy more if I have to. And it's very convenient. I just turn down the loudspeakers on my mixer and turn up the headphones feed, and everybody can hear. And I also record myself right here if I'm playing either the cello or an acoustic guitar or whatever I'm doing. When I did television, I did everything right here in this chair. And I just turn around, hit the space bar to start, or hit the R key to start recording in Sonar. And it's just really easy. Because my friend Glenn Corus always points this out, because this comes up a lot in the forums when people are asking questions. They say, I have this 10-foot by 12-foot room, and I know it's small, but I want to turn it into a control room and a live room. What do you think? And I always say, well, one big room is much, much better than 2 smaller rooms, each one too small to sound any good. And Glenn always says, unless you're recording drummers, if you have a band, I don't want to listen to that for 6 hours. And of course that's true. And if you're recording others for hire, but you're not going to split a 10-foot by 12-foot room. But other than that, there's just so many advantages to a single room, mostly because a room, especially if you have the luxury of a room this large, or even if it's a basement studio, maybe the ceiling isn't so high, but a lot of people have basements that are 20 feet by 30 feet, and it's just better. You have fewer small room issues. The walls are farther away, so the echoes and reflections off the walls are farther later in time. They don't come back so early, which is useful. And the walls are far enough away that by the time the sound does get all the way to the other end of the room and comes back, it's greatly attenuated. It's a lot softer, as well as being more of an echo rather than that phasey comb filtering sound that you get whenever you have reflections off a nearby surface. There's nothing you can do about the floor, and in fact I have a hardwood floor here. But a single reflection off the floor really is okay, and that's not a problem. Virtually every single stage and auditorium in the world has a reflective floor, and that's fine. That's a good sound. The problem is when you have many reflections from a nearby wall on the right, a nearby wall on the left, a nearby wall in front of you, a low ceiling, and the floor. Even if you have carpet on the floor, just 3, 4, 5 other reflections from everywhere else really gives it that small room sound, the boxy sound. If you put the microphones really close to an instrument, you can kind of minimize the contribution of the room, but that's not a good way to mic a lot of instruments. A lot of instruments need room to develop. The sound from an acoustic guitar or a cello or a violin, some of it goes here, so like the highs might go there, the mids there, the lows out the back. So you need to be farther away to capture the full range of an acoustic instrument. But as soon as you get 3, 4 feet away in a small room, it sounds off mic. It has that icky sound to it, which we don't want. So all of this is my way of saying that one large room is better for mixing than 2 small rooms. And the bass problems also are much less severe. Again, because of the distance and just more volume in the room, and you can get away with less bass trapping proportionally. You do need more treatment altogether, but for a large room rather than a small room. If a room is 20 feet long, you don't want 10 feet wide or 20 feet wide. You don't want square or even multiples. Let's maybe do a detailed tour around the studio. I have a lot of cool things here, at least I think they're cool. I have some interesting things here. I really like that note clock. And Ellie is the inspiration for all the clocks. This is her clock, and she's had lots and lots and lots of really cool clocks. A picture used from Strings magazine, an article I wrote. I love that picture of the cellist with his wife hanging onto his back while he plays the cello. That's Stephen Katz and his wife BJ, who's no longer with us, unfortunately. And he's an amazing performer, and you have to see this to believe it. That's my cello teacher, Kate Dillingham, my favorite bass player of all time, James Jamerson, and that's a studio I had previously, the cover photo. When I built this room, I knew I was going to be putting in bass traps, and this was long before I owned real traps and was a manufacturer of commercial acoustic products. But I certainly knew how to make bass traps, and my 1995 article from Electronic Musician actually documented the building of this room and the building of the bass traps in this room. And these are the painted white wooden panels you see. Some are 4 inches thick, some are 2 inches thick, and they alternate with these these darker burlap panels that are high frequency absorbers, mid and high frequency absorbers. And there's more on the ceiling. And more along here, and there's more all around the room, and we'll get to all the others. But then a number of years ago, about 3 or 4 years ago, when I started to seriously get into acoustics, acoustician Wes Lachot, who's a fabulous studio designer, explained to me the importance of absorbing early reflections and getting them away from your ears so you don't hear them. And wouldn't you know that the reflection points for the mix position in this room happen to be right where I had reflecting wood panel bass traps. So that's why these kind of homemade burlap covered Moore absorbers are attached in front of the wood panel bass traps, and they're actually spaced away. There's a 1/4 inch gap which you can't see easily from here. But so the wood panel behind there is still free to vibrate, and I have more on the ceiling. So that's the treatment for this part of the room, and we'll look at some of the other treatment. One thing maybe I should mention, though, I have a pair of mini traps, which I don't think you can see, but they're just resting on the floor and leaning against the front wall to catch those corners. My main speakers are these JBL 4430s, and these are what you find in old-time big studios, and they're powered by a pair of Crown power bass amps. I actually have over 1 kilowatt. They're bi-amp, so I have a separate amp for the 2 woofers and a separate amp for the tweeters. And in fact, while you're over there, the amplifiers are in that behind that little homemade black box, which is actually just pieces of shelving. The problem with all high-powered amplifiers, at least most of them, are they have fans and they make noise, and that's not really conducive. So the back of that is open, and I actually have a homemade 703 absorber that catches the fan noise, and it's really pretty quiet. I also have a pair of NS10s. And, and I had these since the late 1970s when I had a professional studio, and my partner put tissue paper over the tweeters, because the NS10 was like this magical, mysterious thing, and this wonderful thing, and if you can make your mixes sound good on NS10s, they'll sound good anywhere. And I could talk for 20 minutes about that, and I won't now, but there are still remnants of the masking tape that held the tissue paper in place, and I'd scrape it off, but I'm afraid I'd make a worse mess. When I had my professional studio, which I had several of them, but the last one, the big one, we started building, I think, around 77 and finished sometime later in 78. It was a huge project. And we had $250,000 worth of equipment, and the facility itself was $250,000 that we put into this factory shell to make it into a real studio. And it was we had 16-track MCI tape recorder and a console I made myself, and a lot of equipment I made myself, plus all the standard stuff, harmonizer and lexicon, delay, and all the stuff you needed. And it was great for then, but I would have killed to have what I have here in this little box. I can do infinitely more than I could have ever done back there. The only thing I don't have is 16 inputs at one time, but for $400, $500, I could get that and have that in this computer. My entire outboard gear really is this little Mackie 1202 mixer. It's not even the newer 1202 VLZ. It's perfectly fine. The preamps are clean. I don't care what anybody says. It sounds excellent. It's a fabulous monitor controller, and it does everything I need. I never record with reverb, but a lot of times singers or violin players or whatever, or myself, like to monitor with reverb while you're playing a track. It just sounds more inspiring. So I have that outboard lexicon reverb that I actually traded to Ed Zubak. I forget what I traded to him, but he gave me that in exchange. and I have that Zoom effects box, which I use for one of the guitar tracks in television. And that's it. I mean, I have a DAT, I have a CD, I have, you know, a cassette deck, you know, but that's it. And I am a huge proponent of in-the-box mixing and work, and there's a lot of reasons for that. And there are some people saying, oh, the analog stuff sounds better, and I'm not even going to really get into that argument other than to say I disagree that it sounds better. It might sound different. But to me, the modern digital is extremely clean, extremely clear, has great frequency response, doesn't have dropouts like tape has at high frequencies. It doesn't have the jitter. People obsess about jitter in digital audio. The jitter in a $80,000 studio tape recorder is 1,000 times worse than the jitter in any, you know, a $25 Sound Blaster card is going to literally be 1,000 times less jitter than the tape recorder, just because the tape is scraping as it goes by the head and little movements. And, you know, I believe that, yes, there are, adding a little bit of grunge, a little bit of color, sometimes they call it, or character, or glue is one of the words they use for what really is just distortion. And that could be good on a sparse mix, and I've used that myself in Rondo video. I used on the final audio mix, I used a tape simulator, and it really helped. It made it better, but it's not cleaner. You can add that easily after the fact, and you don't have to spend $7,000 for a tube compressor to get a little bit of glue. I used the free plug-in that came with Sonar, and it was great. So, but the advantages of in the box are you don't have to commit to anything. If you record with a compressor and later, you know, you find that, gee, the singer was a little too loud and you can hear the compressor working, you're out of luck. You cannot undo compression. And the same thing with EQ. If you EQ going in, which you often need with analog tape to get over the tape hiss, I know I'm going to need some treble later. Let me add it now to get above the tape hiss. But if you decide you didn't want that, it's very hard to undo later. And you can undo equalization, but you better know exactly what you boosted, what frequency, what the Q was. If it was a parametric equalizer, you got to, you know, make notes of everything. Within the box, you just record straight, and I record everything straight. Now I'm using this DPA microphone. I've did the cello rondo with these AT4033s. And while we're on this, I want to mention I'm just the laziest person in the world. The last thing I want to do, even though I don't do a whole lot of projects, is pack things up and take them off the stands and put them in boxes. So I just leave everything out all the time, and I put these plastic bags over them. We're going to be using these soon, so we can take this off. But I find this really, you know, really convenient, and it's good for lazy people like me. I have a bunch of track lights here, and we've been in this house for I think 14 or 15 years. I have never once had to change a bulb in the track light because I have them on dimmers, and I keep the dimmers about 70–80% of the way up most of the time. They're up all the way now for, you know, to get enough light for this. These are variable transformer dimmers, and there's an article on my website that talks about this. And the advantage behind it is a big round transformer with a big knob and a big carbon wiper that wipes over the windings. But it's a variable transformer, and it's much better than the solid state dimmers in a recording studio. The solid state dimmers are the ones that buzz when they're halfway up, and you get a horrible buzz into everything, and you can't have that in an audio room. These are more wood panel bass traps. This was my company's very first product, and not to turn this into a plug for my company, but this was an attempt to make a portable version of the bass traps that are built in to the corners and front of this room. Yeah, so then there's more corner bass traps, more real traps versions of that, and here's a mini trap, which is just covering kind of that cavity there. And then there's Marcia, who was named for the mannequin character in an old Twilight Zone episode. This shelf in the corner is almost entirely stuff I've written. I've written several programming books. There's a couple books I didn't write, a couple of manuals, but all the magazines in the bottom, all that stuff is all articles I've written, and manuals, software manuals I've written, books I've written. This is from my software era. When we all got together at Microsoft, and there's Bill Gates in there, and I'm on the right, and I was sick as a dog that day. These cartoons were done by Jay Monroe, who used to work for me. Now he works for Microsoft, writing all the help files for Windows Vista, and he's also a cartoonist and an excellent photographer, and you know, and these are all various funny things. But these two cartoons were done by a friend named Bob Spear, and Bob was one of my software company customers, and one of my very early customers, and he makes violins and cellos. He's very famous. There's an article about him on my website from the Strad magazine, Bob is just an amazing person. I could talk for 20 minutes about Bob.
Right.
But he's a fabulous cartoonist, and he's sold violins and cellos to very famous people, including Rostropovich and concert masters of famous orchestras. And this is where I work during the day when people call the Real Traps line and get me. Here I am, right here, looking at that computer, though, and sometimes with Vegas on the screen. If you owe me money, you're in this pile here. One thing I wanted to mention about the mix position in this room is the mix position is about here and it's standing up, with the ears at tweeter level, and that's on purpose. These loudspeakers, these JBL speakers, have very, very good off-axis response. Even sitting down in front of my computer, it sounds very close to what you hear standing up. Not exactly, but I can get real work done, sitting there, even though I'm well below the speakers, just because of their excellent dispersion. This is also a fun room. It's not only not a commercial studio. And when my partner Doug Ferrara comes over, a lot of times we'll jam. And we'll put on like a loop of drum loop, and we'll play bass and guitar and keys, and we'll switch off. And these speakers in this system with all this power goes really, really loud. It's as loud as a real live drummer. I think I've explained well enough about the importance of having a good sounding room. And a large room, if you can possibly manage. If you can't have a large room, then you really need to kill most of the reflections with absorption and maybe diffusion. This room is very live, and right now I'm about 6 feet away from the camera. And we did a similar thing in my living room when we did the guided tour of my living room on the Real Traps website, where I was also about 6 feet away from the camera's microphone. And it really sounded pretty tight and pretty clear. It didn't sound like off mic because that room is a very tight, clear room. It's meant for home theater and two-channel listening room. But this room is a much liver room, and that's on purpose. And when I was earlier this year, I was invited to Criteria Hit Factory Studios in Miami by the NARAS division of the Grammys. Charles Dye invited me to come down and talk about acoustics, and we treated a typical small room. It was our lounge, but of the size, like of a bedroom that most people would mix in, and did a demonstration. Had many people coming in and hearing it with and without the bass traps. But their Studio A is a very, very large, very live room, and it really struck me that this is the way a professional recording engineer works the room, and this is what I've been doing here also. And the idea is when you have a lot of reverb in the room, but it's good reverb, the walls are far away, you have diffusion, you can have a lot of reverb in the room, but it sounds good. It's not colored, it's not boxy, it doesn't sound off mic, it just sounds big, like a cathedral, maybe not quite that big. And then you can, when all the reflecting surfaces are far away, you can control very easily exactly how live a sound you want, by how far the microphone is from the performer. If somebody's playing a violin and you have a string section, put the mic right here, you get a lot of direct sound. Here you get a little more room tone, 6, 7 feet away you'll get a lot of room tone, but it's nice room tone, and you can control that completely, and that's really impossible to do in a small room.